Welcome to Asian Chinese Philosophy and Life. In this channel, I will explain traditional Chinese wisdom in English and with the curiosity of a modern researcher. The Book of Changes, or I Ching, is the origin of all Chinese philosophy. Therefore, it is the best starting point for us to understand Chinese culture, and it offers an ancient code for reading changes of the universe. But before we begin reading the book itself, there are three ancient and beautiful stories I really want to share with you. These are the origin of the I Ching we read today, connected with three great sages. In Chinese tradition, a sage means someone with extraordinary wisdom and moral insight. Let's start with the first sage, Fuxi, a legendary culture hero and one of the earliest ancestors of Chinese civilization. In ancient images, he is often shown with a human upper body and a serpent-like lower body, symbolizing his connection with both humanity and nature. In ancient times, people's survival depended closely on the natural environment, especially weather, seasons, rain, and drought. Fuxi looked upward to observe the heavens and looked downward to examine the earth. He watched the movement of the sun, the moon, and the stars. He observed mountains, rivers, wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. From this vast natural world, he began to understand the most basic patterns of the universe. To record these patterns, Fuxi created a symbolic system, one unbroken line for yang and one broken line for yin. By combining these lines in groups of three, he formed 8 basic symbols. These are known as the 8 Trigrams or Bagua. The story of Fuxi drawing the trigrams represents a great leap in human thought. It suggests that ancient Chinese ancestors were no longer only living passively within nature. They were beginning to observe nature, summarize its patterns, and express the order of the universe through symbols. There is also a beautiful connection in the Chinese language. The word gua in Bagua sounds like the word for hanging. So we may imagine these 8 symbols as if the patterns of the universe were hanging there in front of us, waiting to be understood. In this sense, the Bagua became a key symbolic system to understand change, nature, and reality. Now, if we look at the Bagua from a modern point of view, we can also see it as a kind of symbolic binary system. A solid yang line can be read as 0, and a broken yin line can be read as 1. Since each trigram has 3 lines, it works like a 3-byte system, and 3 binary positions give us 8 possible combinations. This is exactly what the 8 trigrams are. We read each trigram from the bottom to top, so 000 is Qian, representing heaven. 111 is Kun, representing earth. Together, Qian and Kun often stand for the whole universe, yang and yin, the creative and receptive, the beginning of all changes. Then 010 is Li, representing fire and also associated with the sun. 101 is Kan, representing water and also associated with the moon. These 4, Qian, Kun, Li, Kan, are among the most important trigrams. If you look at the South Korea flag, you will notice that it contains exactly these 4 symbols with yin-yang in the center. Next, 011 is Zhen, representing thunder. 100 is Jun, representing wind. These 2 symbols point to movement, weather, and the changing energy of nature. Finally, 001 is Dui, representing lake or wetland, and 110 is Gen, representing mountain. These are images of Earth itself, open water, mountains, and the world people could see and experience around them. So the 8 trigrams are not random symbols. They represent the great elements that ancient people saw, felt, and lived with every day. Heaven, earth, fire and sun, water and moon, thunder, wind, mountain, river, and lake. From this point of view, the Bagua is not only an ancient mystical diagram, it is also a compact symbolic system for describing nature, change, and the universe. With these binary symbols attached, we can start from numbers and use the symbolic logic of the I Ching to interpret change, patterns, and predict possible future directions. In this channel, we will explore together how this ancient binary system works in the I Ching, not only to ask about fate, but also to understand change and guide our choices. The second sage was King Wen of Zhou, or Zhou Wenwang, one of the founders of Western Zhou dynasty. He lived around 1100 BC, near the end of the Shang dynasty, a time often remembered as politically dark and socially unstable. Because King Wen was respected for his virtue and influence, the last Shang king became suspicious of him and put him in prison at Yuli for almost 7 years. It is said that King Wen's son went to the capital city of Shang and tried to rescue their father. However, King Wen's eldest son was killed by the Shang king, and he was forced to eat food made from his son's flesh. Nevertheless, King Wen did not fall into despair. Instead, he devoted himself to studying the 8 Trigrams left by Fuxi, planning his revenge. On the basis of the 8 Trigrams, he combined them in pairs and developed 64 more complex symbolic patterns. This became the 64 hexagrams. Each hexagram contains 6 lines. It can be seen from 2 trigrams placed together, one below and one above. In this way, the simple language of yin and yang became a much richer system for describing change, conflict, opportunity, danger, and transformation. King Wen also gave each hexagram a name and explained each line in the hexagrams with a short statement, known as the hexagram judgments. These judgments do not read like ordinary philosophy. They are brief, symbolic, and sometimes mysterious. There is another historical background that helps us understand this story. In the Shang dynasty, people placed great importance on communication with ancestors, spirits, and heaven. Oracle-born inscriptions and archaeological evidence show that sacrifice, including human sacrifice, played an important role in Shang ritual life. King Wen experienced suffering himself in prison, missed his eldest son, and he also witnessed the suffering of the people under the cruel rule of Shang king. In a time of loneliness, danger, and uncertainty, he reflected on the many situations of human life, difficulty and opportunity, progress and danger, success and obstruction. He also started to realize that if the sun rises and sets, if seasons change, if yin and yang transform into each other, then political power too may rise, decline, and change. Therefore, according to this interpretation, King Wen may have used the language of the hexagram to record the cruelty of the Shang king and to think through possible ways to resist his rule. These complex experiences and ideas were condensed into the changing patterns of the 64 hexagrams. This may partly explain why hexagram judgments often read almost like riddles. They are short, symbolic, and difficult to understand directly. Politically, King Wen needed a new explanation for why they had the right to overthrow and replace Shang. The idea of the mandate of heaven began to take shape in the Western Zhou period. It gave later generations a powerful argument. If a ruler became a tyrant, lost virtue, and harmed the people, then heaven could withdraw its mandate and his rule could be challenged. A new ruler, if morally worthy, can rise and replace him. The story of King Wen teaches us that deep wisdom often emerges from deep suffering. The third sage was Confucius, the founder of the Confucianism. Confucius became deeply interested in the I Ching in his later years. He studied again and again, so intensely that the leather straps binding his bamboo sleeves broke several times. This story gave rise to the famous phrase, "The leather binding broke 3 times," which became a symbol of persistent study. Confucius also once said that if he had a few more years and could devote himself to study the I Ching from the age of 50, he might avoid great errors in life. Confucius and later Confucian scholars are traditionally associated with a series of commentaries on the I Ching, known as the 10 Winds. These commentaries were like wings added to the ancient text. They lifted the I Ching from a book mainly used for divination into a philosophical classic. The 10 wings connected the images of the hexagram within the moral cultivation of the noble person, choice in human life, and the rise and fall of society and the changing order of the world. They give new life to the ancient symbols. Another story or interpretation that I personally love the most is the following one. Confucius may not have valued the I Ching when he was young, as it was mainly used for divination, but as he grew up and studied more deeply the history of Shang and Zhou, including the violence and sacrifice of that age, he began to see the I Ching differently. He may have realized that since the I Ching was already widely used by people asking about the future, it could also become a powerful tool for moral education. So Confucius and later Confucian scholars began to interpret the hexagram statements and judgments from a more humanistic and ethical point of view. This was, in a sense, a huge transformation of human thought. Every time someone used the I Ching to ask about fate, they would also read a Confucian interpretation about virtue, caution, humility, self-cultivation, and proper action. In this way, the I Ching was gradually transformed from a book of divination into a book of moral reflection. Actually, this transformation have already begun with King Wen and his sons. For a ruler, one of the most important questions is not only how to govern people, but how to cultivate people, how to guide society away from violence, cruelty, and moral collapse. Confucius often looked back to the ancient Zhou dynasty order with admiration. He worried about moral decline, the collapse of ritual, and the loss of proper human relationships at his time. In this sense, he continued the work of King Wen and the early Zhou thinkers, but gave it a strong moral and philosophical direction. What I found most fascinating is, even when someone receives a difficult or even dangerous hexagram, the interpretation rarely says simple like this is bad. Instead, it often encourages reflection, patience, caution, and self-correction. And when someone receives a very positive hexagram, the text often reminds them to remain humble and careful. Over time, these ideas enter deeply into the collective unconsciousness of Chinese culture. The I Ching taught people not only to ask what will happen, but to ask what should I do and how can I respond wisely to change. Overall, Fuxi created the trigrams, King Wen then expanded them into the 64 hexagrams, and Confucius and followers gave them deeper moral and philosophical meaning. Together, these three sages helped shape the I Ching into one of the deepest sources of ancient Chinese wisdom. Later, when Qing unified China, the First Empire tried to unify thoughts and culture. Many books were ordered to be burned at that time. Luckily, I Ching was regarded as a technical book, like medicine, agriculture, and other books, so it survived this historical disaster. From the time of Confucius to the late imperial period, thousands of books were written to explain and interpret the I Ching. All these contributions had made I Ching no longer only a book for divination. It became a mirror for reading history, reflecting on our present situation and guiding human life. The 64 hexagrams can be understood as 64 patterns of life situations. At any moment, different forces are interacting: strength and softness, movement and stillness, danger and opportunity, growth and decline. The I Ching helps us to understand where we are within this changing system and how we should act to avoid harm and move toward what is good. It may not give us an instant answer to every question, but it can give us a deeper understanding of the present moment. And from that understanding, it inspires us and has been inspiring every Chinese for more than 2,000 years to create a better future. This is the real power of the I Ching. If you want to explore more of this power with me, subscribe to the channel and I will see you in the next videos.